when I left Christianity and became an atheist, I noticed how Christians seem to prompt, teach, and expect their members to evangelize friends, family, strangers, and interested parties. It's interesting how after leaving Christianity, I've noticed that for a huge part of Christian culture, it's evangelism. And if you've ever been to a church or were a member of a church where pastors have special gifts, almost every single Baptist, Calvinist, fundamentalist, traditional church, it just seemed like every single time we got a pastor that was gifted in evangelism. So imagine 50 weeks out of the year, we would have to listen to a pastor talking about how the end times is near, so everybody just needs to start evangelizing. Love your neighbor and evangelize. It felt like being a Mormon without it being a Mormon. Because when people think of Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, the first thing that comes into most people's mind is that usually very white men under the age of 40 with name tags knocking on your door. It's funny, isn't it, how Christianity has made it into a science. It's kind of like being a salesman, like a car salesman without actually moving cars. And I find it very interesting how if you compare how the average car salesman and pastor and member of Christianity or Christian churches, how they go about witnessing to people is exactly the same way that car salesmen's work. Christianity is like a transaction, and you can debate about that. Put your thoughts in the comments. But at the end of the day, every religion has some form of recruitment. Whether or not they want you to be members and give money, it's really up to interpretation. But I always find it funny and ironic how institutions that make the idea of being greedy a sin are the most greedy people on the planet. No matter how much money you give to churches, Christian nonprofits, religious institutions, they're always asking for money, if you've ever noticed that. I mean, Joel Osteen, no matter how many jets he has, he's always asking for more. And I should have caught on much younger, but when you aren't pushed and taught to have critical thinking, to reject mental gymnastics, it's hard, almost impossible, to break out a very narrow-minded vision. We call it religious tunnel vision. I find it ironic that churches that hate greed, hate overconsumption, run on the generosity and greed of religious leaders. And Christianity would not be the number one religion on the planet with the most members if they didn't evangelize. Isn't it interesting how most religions come from some religion? I mean, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, basically all forms of most white man religions and denominations came about from a main source of religion. I mean, all the Protestant denominations came about by breaking away from the Catholic Church. And, I mean, it is not a surprise that all forms of religion come from a source. Even being a Baptist, Lutheran, they all come from the greed that is prevalent in churches. They will split themselves apart. They will schism, which is a great breaking away of denominations, in order to have the color carpet they want. I'm not kidding. They will break away from churches. I mean, that's why all the denominations came about. Somebody didn't like that they were worshiping in a certain way, and they just couldn't take it. They couldn't stand it. So they had to make Christianity more complex by creating another denomination. But evangelism is an art. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's inherently bad. But I will say, if you're losing as many members as you're gaining, are you really gaining something? And I've seen that most of evangelical issues comes about from losing members. And in my opinion, most church issues, such as very low attendance, fewer members becoming members or staying members, you have an ongoing problem. A very ongoing problem. And people are starting to wake up. In the last 50 years, we've seen so many groups of people switch denominations, choose a different religion, or completely throw off the bonds of being in a religious or spiritual group. Now, I'm not going to tell people how to live. As long as your religion, your belief system makes you a better person, does not impact other people's rights, you treat all orientations, nationalities, ethnicities, gender, everyone with equality, kindness, and love. I don't care what you believe. You can believe in anything or anyone. I don't care. The problem is when you take away from other people because you think you're better than other people. And it's a very prevalent thing, in case you haven't noticed. And if you haven't noticed, that's perfectly fine. Not everyone grows up in a high control religion. I think it can be dangerous to evangelize people in the same way as a sneaky car salesman. You're giving a bad name to religion. Because religion is a transaction. The more seats they fill up, the more the offering plate is bigger. The more money they can have, the more influence, the more power, the more political pull that they have. So it's not a surprise that religion goes after non-believers and political sway. Which is why religion such as Judaism, there's less than 1% of the world's population that are active Jewish followers who are what we call kosher and following Judaism. Why? Because they don't evangelize. Their goal isn't to evangelize. It's a close-knit community. And for the most part, Jewish people are very quiet, law-abiding, decent people. They keep to themselves, just the way Amish people do. And there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, if all religion went about their flock the way Jews went about it, there would be no posters, no evangelism, no annoying people knocking on your door. Religion would probably get a better image if we all started treating religion the same way as groups like Judaism treats non-members. But we don't live in that world. And I'm sure everyone has had Mormons come to your home and knock on your door. If you have to sell somebody knowledge, or money, or to get them to buy something. It's a transaction. And there's very little difference between selling a car and selling Jesus. And you would be amazed what goes into evangelism. And they're not just selling Jesus. Sometimes they're selling all kinds of events and all kinds of family activities. Retreats, lock-ins, VBS. It's all a ploy to get the kids in or the adults in. 2 for the price of 1. That's why they always want people to bring a friend. And by friend, probably someone who isn't a member of the church or isn't a Christian. Evangelism is one of the consistently best ways to lure people in. Cults do it all the time. We call it phishing. And it's very close to emotional priming. And I'm not saying that everyone who evangelizes people are sneaky, underhanded, nefarious people. Of course not. But it is free labor, free volunteer work. There's a lot of shame that goes into being an evangelist or a missionary. And some of the ways missionaries function, work, and get into ministries is extremely unethical. Not always, but a lot of the time it's very unethical. The whole issue about evangelism is, if you have to bring in a lot of people to keep your religion relevant, that says a lot about people in your church. If you're constantly losing people from your church and you have to bring in 2 people because one person is leaving, then maybe you need to change the way you run your church. Because decent, moral, kind institutions, they don't lose as many people as they gain. If that were true. I mean, our population is sinking, which I'm perfectly fine with. But people don't like when their numbers go down, because that means they're not going to get as much money, they're not going to have as much political sway. And I liked watching the movie Heretic, where those 2 Mormon girls knock on that crazy man's door. Evangelism is a type of religious trap. And people who are foolish or naive enough to fall into it, I have nothing but compassion for those people. But at the end of the day, religions have to sell a dream, an ideology, an idea, in order to pay the bills. And religion is just like Planet Fitness. They have to sell memberships or they close their doors. And they always have to upsell to keep the benches, the podiums, the televisions. And in my opinion, religion is one of the most nefarious and most ongoing traps, and scam artists are very prevalent in missionary and evangelism. Joel Osteen, imagine how much money he brings in a year. If you want to make a lot of money, start a religion or open a church door. Luckily, I'm an atheist. I don't give money to the religious groups. If I want to help someone, I volunteer, I protest, or I give money right to the source. I donate things. I get out there. But the most nefarious religions rely on evangelism to bring in unsuspecting prey. Because if they actually treated the people in their church extremely well, consistently, they wouldn't be losing 40% of the people in the pews. Because people are recognizing hypocrisy, cruel, gaslighting behavior, sexism, free labor, emotional toil for women, rampant homophobia, transphobia, and xenophobia. People are waking up and realizing that if I want to be a kind person, maybe I just need to avoid religion in general, or choose a different denomination or religion, because this one isn't cutting it for me. But churches will always use evangelism because it's baked into the fabric. I mean, it is in the startings of Christianity. Just like have as many babies as possible is biblical, so is getting as many people in the pew as possible. And I've talked numerous times how religion is a scam. It's a very common abusive cycle of addiction, creating a problem that doesn't exist, and then never being able to overcome it. But they sell you an idea that you can, which you can't and you won't. So I just rather stick with critical thinking, because critical thinking has never asked for a tithe.